Welcome to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. For over 20 years, I've been working to better understand and support people in navigating this human experience. And I've come to believe that stories are encoded with the collective wisdom of all who have come before us. That they bring us into connection with the collective unconscious and contain treasure waiting to be decoded. This podcast explores traditional tales through that lens. Each episode offers a story told in full, an exploration of the medicine it may be offering, and practices to help you integrate that medicine. Today's story comes from ancient Greece, from Hesiod's Theogony and Works and Days, written in the 8th century BCE. It's called Prometheus, and it's our second journey into Greek mythology. This is a tale about what happens when a titan who sided with the new order of Olympus betrays that order for the sake of humanity, and the terrible price that comes with such defiance. Let's begin. Part 1. The Story. In the beginning, when the world was young, the Titans ruled. But Zeus himself, the son of the king of the Titans, Kronos, overthrew his father and the old order, casting most of the Titans into the dark prison of Tartarus beneath the earth. Not all Titans fought against Zeus, however. Prometheus, whose name also means forethought, had sided with Zeus in the war, as had his brother Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought. And so they were spared the fate of their kin, granted pardon by the new king of Olympus. But Prometheus had a very particular fondness for humanity. He had watched them since their earliest days, struggling in the cold and the darkness, and he wanted to help them. What happened next would change everything, for humanity, for Prometheus himself, and for the relationship between gods and mortals, forever. The gods and mortal humans came together at Mecone to settle a dispute. The question was this: when an animal was sacrificed, which portions should go to the immortal gods, and which should remain with the mortal humans? Prometheus volunteered to divide the sacrifice. He took a great ox and butchered it very carefully, and then, with cunning art, he arranged 2 portions. In the first portion, he wrapped all the good meat and all of the rich inner organs, the liver, the kidneys, the heart, thick with fat. But he hid them inside the ox's stomach, a sack of skin that looked very unappealing, even repulsive. In the second portion, he took the white bones, nothing but bones, stripped clean, and arranged them with skillful craft. He covered them entirely with shining white fat that glistened and gleamed, looking like the richest offering imaginable. He placed both portions before Zeus, and stepped back. Zeus, king of gods and men, looked at the 2 offerings, and his eyes narrowed. He spoke with a sneer in his voice. "Son of Iapetus, most glorious of all lords, how very unfairly you have divided the portions." Prometheus smiled softly, not forgetting his cunning plan. "Zeus, most glorious and greatest of all the eternal gods," he said. "Choose whichever of these portions your heart desires." He spoke with trickery in mind. But Zeus, whose wisdom is everlasting, was not fooled. He saw through the deception clearly. He knew which pile held the meat and which held only bones. But, in his heart, he was already planning mischief against mortal men, mischief that would be fulfilled. With both hands, Zeus lifted the portion covered in shining fat, and he unwrapped it. Beneath the gleaming surface, nothing but white bones, artfully arranged. Anger swelled in Zeus's chest, and wrath entered his spirit. "Son of Iapetus, clever above all," Zeus said, his voice cold. "You have not forgotten your cunning arts, I see." And from that moment, Zeus decided on his revenge. He would take from humanity the very thing they needed most: fire. Without fire, humans couldn't cook their food. They couldn't warm themselves in the winter. They couldn't work metal or make tools. They couldn't push back the darkness. Zeus had hidden fire away, and humanity suffered. But Prometheus couldn't bear to see them struggle in the cold and the dark, so he stole fire from the gods. He took a hollow fennel stalk, a plant whose pithy centre could carry an ember without burning through, and he brought fire from Olympus down to earth. He gave it to humanity in secret, deceiving Zeus. For a time, humans had warmth again, and light, the ability to shape their world. But Zeus discovered the theft. He called Prometheus before him, and his voice shook with rage.
"Son of Iapetus, you are glad that you outwitted me and stole fire," Zeus said. "You think yourself clever, but this will prove a great plague on you and on the humans who you love so much. I will give them as a price for fire an evil thing, a gift they will embrace with joy whilst they welcome their own destruction."
Zeus called on Hephaestus, the god of fire and metalwork.
"Fashion me a creature from earth and water," he commanded. "Give it a human voice and the same strength as the goddesses. Make it beautiful beyond measure."
He shaped clay and water into the form of a modest maiden. Then the other gods came, each adding their gifts to this form. Athena, the bright-eyed goddess, dressed in her fine garments, taught her the art of weaving. The Graces and Persuasion placed golden necklaces upon her. The Hours crowned her head with flowers of spring. Aphrodite gave her beauty that would stir longing in the hearts of men. And Hermes placed within her lies, the habits of a thief, a shameless mind, and a deceitful nature, all according to Zeus's plan. And when the maiden was complete, Zeus called her Pandora, all gifts, because every god in Olympus had given her something. But the gifts were not kindness. She was designed as a trap, as a weapon crafted to look like a blessing. Zeus sent Hermes to deliver Pandora to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, whose name means afterthought, because he always understood too late. Prometheus had warned his brother many times, "Never accept a gift from Zeus. Send it back, or it will bring suffering to humankind." But when Epimetheus saw Pandora's beauty, he forgot all about his brother's warning. He accepted her, and he made her his wife. And she brought with her a great jar. The jar contained everything that Zeus had hidden away, all of the sorrows and plagues that had not yet touched humanity, toil and disease, old age and death, pain and suffering of every kind. And Pandora opened the jar. Whether she was simply curious or compelled by the nature that Hermes had given her, or simply fulfilling the design for which she'd been created by Zeus, the story doesn't clarify, but either way, she opened the jar, and everything inside flew out into the world. Disease spread amongst humanity. Their bodies grew weak and aged. They knew pain that they'd never known before. Labour became hard and endless. The earth, which had given freely before, now demanded sweat and toil for every harvest. And when Pandora slammed the lid shut, only one thing remained in that jar: hope. Trapped inside, unable to escape. Whether this was mercy or further cruelty, no one can say. But from that day forward, the lives of mortal men were full of trouble and grief. And what of Prometheus? Zeus had not forgotten the Titan who dared to deceive him, who had stolen fire and given it to mortals against his will. The punishment was terrible. Zeus commanded that Prometheus be bound with chains that could never be broken. He was dragged to the edge of the world, to the remote peaks of the Caucasus Mountains, where the wild lands stretched beyond civilization. There, Zeus drove a great shaft through the middle of Prometheus's body, pinning him to a rocky cliff. And every day, a great eagle, the emblem of Zeus himself, would come with talons and beak, and the eagle would tear open Prometheus's chest and eat his liver. The Titan would scream in agony as the bird fed, but because he was immortal, his liver would grow back each night, regenerating whilst he hung in the darkness, waiting for dawn. And when the sun rose, the eagle would return, day after day, year after year, and century after century. The Firebringer suffered for his gift to humanity. The Greeks told that eventually Heracles, the great hero, Zeus's own son, would come and kill the eagle, that he would break Prometheus's chains and set him free, with Zeus's permission, that the god of forethought would be reconciled with the king of Olympus at last. But that deliverance lay far in the future, for now Prometheus hung on that mountain, paying the eternal price for defying Zeus and loving humanity more than he feared divine wrath. The fire burned in human hearths. The eagle fed on the Titan's liver, and both would continue for as long as the world endured. Part 2. The Medicine. Let's explore the medicine that this story offers. On the surface, this is about rebellion and punishment, a god who defied the king of Olympus and paid a terrible price for that. But as a story that has endured for nearly 3 millennia, there are much deeper patterns here worth exploring. Before we go deeper, if you know somebody who might appreciate this story's medicine right now, please share this episode with them. And if you're enjoying the podcast and would like to help others find it too, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Thank you. So, Prometheus. The name means forethought, the capacity to see ahead, to plan, to anticipate consequences. And this is absolutely crucial to understanding what happened here. Prometheus didn't stumble into any of these consequences. He wasn't naive about what would follow, which means that he knew. He saw the entire sequence. The trick at Mycone would anger Zeus. Zeus would take fire from humanity. Prometheus would steal it back. Zeus would create Pandora. The jar would open. The plagues would release. And Prometheus himself would hang on that mountain for eternity, his liver eaten daily. He saw all of it, and yet he initiated the sequence anyway. So this isn't a story about unintended consequences. This is a story about counting the full cost and choosing to pay it. Let's look carefully at Mycone. Why did Prometheus use trickery instead of honesty? Why not simply give Zeus a fair choice, or even advocate directly for humanity's need? Probably because the power imbalance made honesty impossible. Zeus's power meant he could take whatever he wanted. So Prometheus used deception. He made the bones look appealing, he hid the meat in ugly wrapping, and he let Zeus choose. The text tells us clearly, Zeus saw through it. Zeus, whose wisdom is everlasting, saw and failed not to perceive the trick. So why did Zeus choose the bones anyway? Possibly because he wanted justification. By choosing the deceptive portion, Zeus created justification for punishing humanity. Perhaps this speaks of the tendency that tyranny has for finding some excuse for carrying out their will. But perhaps there's deeper medicine. Prometheus, with his forethought, surely anticipated this too, which means he initiated a sequence that he knew would harm the humans he was trying to help. Why? Because inaction must have been worse. Because standing by and watching whilst Zeus took advantage of humanity in perpetuity, whilst having the capacity to do something about it, would have been worse than the fate that he saw. Perhaps bearing the cost of action is more bearable than bearing the cost of inaction. Perhaps his nature couldn't bear sitting by and watching Zeus take advantage of the power imbalance with humanity. After Zeus takes the fire from humanity, Prometheus steals it back and smuggles it down from Olympus in a fennel stalk. Fire represents so much more than the literal flame. It's the technology that transformed their existence entirely. Warmth, nourishment, light in the dark, transformative energy, their capacity for conscious engagement. When Prometheus returns fire to the humans, Zeus's response is not to take fire back again, but to create Pandora, who will bring disease and toil, old age and death into the world. The punishment falls not on Prometheus at first, but on humanity. Zeus says, "You give humans fire, I will give them suffering to go with it." So perhaps this is the price that we pay for the blessing of fire. Every power contains its opposite, yin and yang, chaos and order, light and dark. The capacity to transform our world is inseparable from the capacity to create suffering. Fire cooks food, and it burns. Knowledge illuminates, and it terrifies. Consciousness awakens us, and it burdens us. Technology builds, and it destroys. This is about the dual nature of power itself. When you gain consciousness or capability, you simultaneously gain capacity for suffering and harm. Not as punishment, but as an inherent property. This is a cost that Prometheus surely did foresee, but he knew it was better than the alternative. And what of the medicine in Prometheus's transgressions? He did try to trick the king of the gods. He did steal the fire from Olympus. Perhaps there's complex medicine here. It's not simply that we should reach for the forbidden. Some reaching for the forbidden is appetite masquerading as courage. This is perhaps why power comes hand in hand with the plagues. But in some cases, reaching for the forbidden is consciousness advancing transgression. Prometheus stealing fire, Psyche lighting the lamp, Eve eating the apple. These violations of established order are necessary for evolution, even though they're costly. Perhaps the plagues teach us to reach judiciously, not recklessly, to count the cost before transgressing, to ensure that the violation serves genuine growth, not just comfort or pleasure. The story doesn't present the return of the fire as straightforward heroism. Prometheus's gift is real, but so is the plague that accompanies it. Both are true. He foresaw that, and he knew what he must do. Yet it is a transgression, and there will be consequences. And perhaps there's medicine in the message that some transgressions are necessary, despite that. Now we come to Pandora. She's often portrayed as a curious fool who opened a forbidden box, but Hesiod's version is much more intentional. Pandora is a trap. Zeus designed her specifically to be irresistible, beautiful, skilled in weaving, adorned by all the gods. And she's sent to Prometheus, whose name means afterthought. Prometheus, forethought, warned his brother, never accept gifts from Zeus. But Prometheus, afterthought, accepts the gift anyway. This is humanity's pattern. We do know better, we have been warned. We understand intellectually what we shouldn't do, and we do it anyway, sometimes, because the gift is too beautiful, too tempting, too present to refuse for the sake of some future consequence that we can't yet feel. And yet that sits with the complexity. Prometheus knew that this would happen, and it's all a part of the rich tapestry of how consciousness advances. And notice what Pandora is made of. The beauty of Aphrodite, the skill of Athena, persuasion from the Graces. These are divine qualities, not inherently good or evil, but weaponized by the deception that Hermes contributed and by their destructive purpose. The medicine here is perhaps, when power creates something deliberately to harm, it corrupts the expression of even genuine qualities. Beauty becomes a trap, skill becomes confinement, persuasion becomes manipulation. The gifts become shadow versions of themselves, destructive expressions of archetypal powers. When Pandora opens the jar, she's not being evil. She's fulfilling the design for which she was created. Sometimes we are simply instruments for larger patterns, neither responsible nor free. And outpour all of the afflictions that become integral to the human experience. Disease, hard labor, aging, death, suffering of every kind. And hope remains trapped inside the jar. In honesty, I wasn't sure what to do with this. Is hope staying in the jar a kind of mercy or a cruelty? And then the deeper question, if hope did remain in the jar, how is it that we believe that we do experience hope now? Maybe it isn't so clear that we do. Perhaps we have something that we call hope, but isn't the pure hope that remained trapped in Pandora's jar. Perhaps we don't have access to pure hope, but something we feel in its place. Wishful thinking, optimism about outcomes, projection of desired futures. And perhaps it is imperfect because this thing that we call hope in some way torments us. After all, it can lead to disappointment. It can keep us enduring suffering that we might otherwise escape. Perhaps true hope, the kind that could sustain us without tormenting, remains inaccessible. Perhaps Zeus did keep hope from us. Perhaps the true sustaining force that we have is not hope, but meaning. Perhaps meaning is both human because it requires devotion and transcendent because it doesn't require outcomes. It will sustain you, but you can't have it without also carrying what it requires of you. This weight is perhaps tied to the plagues themselves. This is the cost of awareness. And then we come to Prometheus's punishment. He's chained to a mountain at the edge of the world, an eagle eating his liver daily, the organ regenerating every night so that the torture continues forever. Why the liver specifically? In ancient Greek understanding, the liver was the seat of emotion, of passion, of desire, the organ that feels rather than thinks. So Prometheus, the god of forethought, of rational planning, is punished in his emotional body. The part of him that feels is endlessly devoured whilst his head remains clear about his choice. And here is the dark irony. Had Prometheus not intervened, he would have suffered daily emotional torment watching humanity struggle at the hands of the tyrannical gods or without fire. Whatever it was that he foresaw. Zeus's punishment forces him to experience the physical simulation of the torment that in some sense he acted to prevent. But Prometheus chose this over the alternative. Prometheus is a force that breaks established order for the sake of those without power. He's the Titan who sided with Zeus against his own kind, and then betrayed the new Olympian order when he saw how it treated the vulnerable humans. So he represents something essential about forethought itself. The capacity to see ahead seems to create natural responsibility. If you can foresee suffering, and you have the power to prevent it, what is your obligation? Prometheus answered, I must act, even knowing the full cost, even knowing that my efforts may not ultimately prevent suffering, even knowing I will pay eternally. Because the alternative, watching whilst having the capacity to help, was unbearable. Perhaps we can take from this the simple medicine that there may sometimes be a great cost in acting for good, but that choosing which suffering to bear is in itself an act of agency. Prometheus could not have avoided suffering, he could only choose its form, and so he chose active. As for humanity in this story, we are both central and passive. We didn't ask for this conflict. We didn't play any role in the distribution of the sacrifice. We didn't steal the fire. But we receive both the gift and the punishment. Both the fire and the plagues. Both the consciousness and the weight of consciousness. And the whole sequence reveals how power and resistance to power inevitably affect those that they claim to be fighting for or protecting. And the final resolution? The story tells us that eventually Heracles, Zeus's own son, kills the eagle and frees Prometheus, with Zeus's permission. This suggests eventual reconciliation. Not because Prometheus evolved, he was already evolved, but perhaps Heracles, Zeus's son, represents the evolution of Zeus. This story doesn't offer simple answers. It shows us fire and plagues arriving together. Gift and curse inseparable. Responsibility and suffering both real. Prometheus saw everything that would happen and chose it anyway, not because the consequences were acceptable, but because foreseeing humanity's suffering whilst having the power to act was unbearable. The question the story asks us isn't whether to defy tyranny, but which suffering we can bear, the cost of standing up or the cost of watching. Both involve pain. The question is which pain is ours to carry. And it reminds us, be discerning. Some transgressions advance consciousness and are worth their cost, while others are appetite pretending to be courage. And this story shows us what we call hope may be unreliable, but meaning, the kind that we give ourselves to and doesn't require outcomes, is true and can sustain us. The fire burns, the eagle feeds, both continue, and somewhere in that tension lives the medicine that we need. Part 3. Integration Practices. The medicine doesn't come from understanding these patterns intellectually. It comes from the practices, allowing the transformation to happen in your body and in your honest acknowledgement of where you are. Here are 3 practices to help you integrate this story's medicine. First practice, the cost you saw coming. Prometheus had forethought. He saw the entire sequence and chose it anyway, not because consequences were unclear, but because inaction would have been unbearable. Take 20 minutes this week to write about a situation where you face or you have faced a choice between 2 forms of suffering. Active suffering, the cost of standing up, speaking out, acting on your values even when you know it will bring consequences on yourself and possibly others that you care about. And passive suffering, the cost of watching, staying silent, not intervening whilst something you know is wrong continues. The question isn't about which one involves suffering, they both do. The question is, which suffering might we bear? Write about what you'll see coming if you do act, and write about what you'll carry if you don't. Which suffering can you live with? Neither choice is wrong, but we do choose one of them. Second practice, hope is trapped, but meaning is available. Hope remained trapped in Pandora's jar, and perhaps this is why what we call hope can so often end up tormenting us in some way. True hope may be inaccessible, but meaning is available. Take your journal and explore these questions. First, where am I clinging to hope that torments me? Hope for a specific outcome, hope for things to be different, hope for someone to change, hope for suffering to end in a particular way. Write specifically, not abstract hope, but the particular hoped-for futures that you're carrying. And then ask, what would shift if I released these hoped-for outcomes, and instead found meaning in what is, including the suffering? Viktor Frankl survived the concentration camps, not through the hope that he would survive, but through the meaning he found even in that hell. Meaning allows us to bear suffering without needing it to end in a certain way. And the final question, what meaning exists in my current situation that doesn't depend on hoped-for changes? And notice, meaning comes with weight, consciousness, responsibility, the burden of knowing. This is part of the price of fire. You can't have meaning without carrying what it requires of you. Write what emerges. See if meaning feels different from hope. Third practice, eaten by the eagle. Prometheus's liver, his emotional body, the part of him that feels, was eaten daily whilst his mind remained clear about his choice. This practice is for anyone whose emotional being is paying the price for the choices that they've made. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, place your hand on your upper right abdomen where your liver sits, and ask, what daily suffering am I enduring as a consequence of the decision that I've made? Don't rush to answer. Feel it in your body. What emotion lives there? Stay with this for at least 10 minutes, just witnessing, just acknowledging the cost that your emotional body carries for choices that your rational mind made. Now here's the practice. Can you hold both truths at once without one cancelling the other? Sometimes we make decisions that serve us, and sometimes we don't. Right now we're not making that kind of assessment. We're simply noticing and holding both forces. Most of us either minimize the pain to justify the choice, it's worth it, it's fine, Or we use the pain as proof that we've made a mistake. If it hurts this much, I must have been wrong. The medicine is not in making that judgment. The medicine is in holding both honestly, the choice that you made and what the choice is costing you. The medicine in this story is complex. Prometheus gave humanity fire, knowing the full price that would come for him and for them. Zeus punished humanity for a transgression that they didn't commit. Pandora was gifted as a trap, and hope remained imprisoned whilst the plagues flew free. There are no clean answers here, just the recognition that gifts and plagues often arrive together, that defying tyranny has real costs, that sometimes we choose values over safety, caring over comfort, and action over watching, and then we pay, and those we love may pay, and the suffering is genuine even when it was the right choice. The story holds all of this without resolving it, and perhaps that's the deepest medicine, learning to live with the complexity, the cost, and the ambiguity. The wisdom in these old stories waits patiently. I hope this one's medicine found you where you needed it. Thank you for listening to Story Medicine. I am Joe Summerfield. Until next time.